We are excited to have Lonnie Jones with us this morning. He's going to be teaching and preaching for us today. We always love having him here with us. We're glad I can kind of see now where all the classes sit. So it looks like we got Cornerstone and Salt over here. We got different places, different areas, and so I'm not going to even ask if you'll move forward. I try every time, Lonnie. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So we're just glad everybody's here. Let's say a prayer and welcome Lonnie to the stage. Father, thank you for today. We're just grateful to be here, grateful to be in this place where we can study and learn and worship you, Father, because you are so worthy. You're worthy of all praise, honor, glory. You're worthy of our entire lives. And Father, we give those to you today, and we just pray that you would hear our prayer of praise that we offer up to you this morning, that you would be with Lonnie, not only as he teaches here in just a few seconds, but also as he preaches to us today, Father. What a blessing he is and a gift to your church, and we just continue to ask you to bless his ministry, bless his life, and help him to continue to impact souls the way that he does. God, we love you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, it is a pleasure to be with you. I'm not going to stand up there because you won't sit close enough, so I'm going to stand down here. The seats up here cost just as much as the ones in the back, and you may not be aware of that. You don't have to have a special ticket. I'm in a relationship with this congregation and have been in it for several years where I provide counseling services to your members. Everybody's not always aware of that, but I have a little private practice in Huntsville, Alabama, and if you're a member at Beltline, you don't have to have an elder call, you don't have to have a minister call. You can just call my number directly and say, hey, I'm a Beltline member and I want to talk to you about something. The only downside of that is you will have to come to Huntsville. And depending on the time of day you do that, it may test your Christianity because they should overpass Madison. That's all I'm saying. I said what I said, all right? But and every now and then the elders invite me to come over just so you have a name with a face and a face with the name. As we studied together this morning, one of the things that they asked me to do is spend the Bible class talking somewhat about parenting and then talk a little bit about marriage at the worship service. So if you have your Bibles, and we'll look at Deuteronomy chapter 6. If you're going to take a group of people that were, indoctrinated or enculturated in Egyptian culture for 430 years, and you're going to transplant them from Egypt to a new place, and you're going to create a different relationship with them. You're going to have a covenant relationship with them. What do you do to make sure the second generation is trained in that covenant? How do you propagate, this is who we are and this is who we want our kids to be? I think that's a big problem in the church is because we're losing the second and third generations. They tell me that third generation family businesses don't work very well. You can drive through Paint Rock Valley and find all kind of property for sale, and it's third and fourth generation property owners because the kids live in town and they don't want to grow cotton, they don't want to grow cows. I told my wife if you want to live on the Paint Rock River, it'd probably take an afternoon to drive around and knock on some doors and say, hey, you have any property for sale? And this little old fella would say, well, my kids own it, but they're not interested in it. And so how do you get the next generation of the church to be spiritually self-reliant? And it's really interesting in some of the studies. If you are interested in the study, Almost Christian, Why They Left, and a book called Sticky Faith. Now, I'll have to admit, when I saw Sticky Faith, I thought it was about Spider-Man becoming a Christian. Spider-Man is not in the book, but it's a really good study of college-age kids and why they either stayed or left their faith. So this is the instruction to Israel. This is the second generation. Most of the time when we think about exposing our children to good material, what we think about is what? Send them to the experts. Isn't that right? We want to expose them to the experts. As a young youth minister, and I mean young, 16, 17 years old, working for a small church in Anniston, Alabama, I read some things that the Bible said about parenting, and as a young youth minister, you have a sermon entitled 10 Commandments for Parents. Well, then you get married, and you have a toddler, and your sermon becomes 5 suggestions for parents. And then your toddler becomes a teenager and you tell the elders, hey, let's hire a dude from out of town with a briefcase to come in and talk about parenting because we need an expert. Well, let's see what God says about this second generation. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, the Shema. This is what the Israelites would recite as one of their prayers. The first word in this in Hebrew is Shema. Now, I'm not pronouncing that right because Hebrew is a dead language and I'm Southern. So this probably pronounced, but it's Southern Hebrew. And it's the very first word in the Shema is hear. Hear, this is verse 4 of chapter 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk to them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on your doorpost, on your houses, and on your gates. You understand that what he's talking about in this context is instead of lining the children up and having them come to Moses, who is the expert, he has a personal audience with God. He spends enough time in the presence of God that he glows in the daylight. God will say of him, there's no other servant I have who is humble as Moses, and I talk to him as a friend, and I talk to him face to face. Well, if I've got a guy who has literal face time with God, I want my kids to go see him. I want my kids to hang around him. I want him to be their youth minister. But God's instructions to Moses is those kids aren't your job. Those kids are your job because you're their parents. And instead of compartmentalizing what we do with our children, I call this conversational spirituality. Anybody here struggle with family devotionals? Yeah. You know why we struggle with family devotionals? Because of the church model. So, Bobby and Susie and Mom sit there in front of the fireplace and Dad gets up and we're going to have family devotional. Well, I need to make announcements. The dog needs to be fed. And it becomes, we try to have a song and a prayer. That's not family devotion. And devotion and devotional are two different things. Devotion is a heart mindset. Devotional is an activity. And what he's talking about in this context is what I've come to call conversational spirituality, or creating a subculture of spirituality in your home. I learned this from a 15-year-old boy in Guntersville, Alabama. When you're a young youth minister and you show up at a retreat or a camp, they go, hey, Lonnie, welcome, glad you're here. You're going to camp, you're going to sleep with the boys. When you get a little older, you pull into camp, they go, Brother Jones, we're glad you're here. We have a cabin for you. It's noise protected and has air conditioning. You can tell when you make that. Well, this is in the days when I was young enough to sleep with the kids. If you're the guest speaker on a retreat, get a top bunk in the corner. There's only one way they can approach you. Okay? You've got high ground advantage. I'm not supposed to bring a knife to camp, but I do. I've seen too many Jason movies, and so I take weapons to camp. Well, if you get in this room full of kids in an old rustic cabin and you crawl up on the top bunk and you pull that Bowie knife out and you hang it upside down in the rafters and you lay down and you raise up and put your hand on it. Lay down, raise up, put your hand on it. Then you just look at that room seriously. And you go, if you boys will be real quiet tonight, I might not have a flashback. And you sleep the whole night. They don't bother you. They don't bother your luggage. They leave you alone. And so I'm laying here in this bunk, and it's dark. And I hear this voice, hey, Lonzo. So, uh-oh, I'm being lured out of my bunk to be attacked. Because they'll throw you in the pool just because they can, or they'll try to anyway. And so I go, what? Hey, Lonzo, lean over there. Just a kid named Chad Smith. Chad's a deacon at the Owens Crossroads Church of Christ. He made a career as a Huntsville police officer. He was a marksman for our SWAT team, and he retired as an investigator. But this is when he's 15 years old. What? He goes, I usually ask everybody I meet what their favorite Bible verse is, and I didn't ask you. Reset. I crawled out of that bunk and sat down on a dirt-covered concrete floor at this camp down here, turned my light on and said, well, today my favorite verse is this. And a light came on over here, and a light came over here, and those boys crowded around, and we sat on the floor. Now, this is not Devo time. This is not cabin study time. We're sitting around having a conversation about what the Word of God means to us, just like we talk about hunting, fishing, or NCAA basketball. Conversational spirituality. It's not something that is contrived. It's not something that we take time out of our lives to do. It's part of our lives. And God tells Moses to tell the children of Israel, hey, when it comes time to pass this on to your children, your devotion really doesn't take place in the tabernacle. It's going to be influenced by tabernacle, and later on it's going to be influenced by temple. But this is daily connection that our family has a spiritual self-identity, and we're spiritually oriented. So when you're at your house, and the text says, you put these things in your heart. Now, mom and dad, if it's not in your heart, grandmother, grandfather, if it's not in your heart, aunt, uncle, if it's not in your heart. And by the way, this is not just about children. This is what makes a congregation strong, because you have a permeation of spirituality that is not compartmentalized. And so the thing that I think about God, the thing that I believe about God, the love of God and my love for God permeates my existence, so that I impress these things not just on my children, but on my wife and on my neighbors and on my friends and on my fellow congregants. And I talk about them when I walk along the road, and when I lie down, and when I rise up, and I put them as symbols on my hands, and I bind them on my foreheads, and I write them on the door frames of our houses. When we're really tied into that Christianity is something that we are, not something that we do, then it permeates our existence. And children sometimes get a mixed message about what Christianity is. We let Christianity and athletics compete with each other. Well, there shouldn't be a competition. Athletics should be a place where I can manifest my Christianity. And it's simply that it becomes a priority. And if you play ball or you play travel ball, the coach needs to understand, hey, we have to do some things at a certain time on the weekend because of who we are. I had a little medical adventure this month. Not trying to be self-aggrandizing, but I was sitting in a hunting stand in Florence, Alabama, and went in incredible, incredible pain. In 2009, my large intestine ruptured. I had an 18-inch rotten section of my colon, and I was on another hunting trip, by the way. Well, Jackie said, no more hunting out of town in January. But the mesh they put in 2009 had separated and degraded, and it let stuff that's not supposed to get out, and I had this knot. Looked like I had a tennis ball sticking out of my stomach. And I thought, that's not normal. And so I went to the hospital and had a little surgery, and the surgery, I was in Sheffield, no offense if you know people who are medical people in Sheffield, but I sort of felt like either Granny Clampett or a witch doctor had gotten a hold of me. My daughter had me transferred to Huntsville, and once I got to Huntsville, the trauma surgeon there said, hey, you got 500 cc's of fluid on your lung, and we found an abscess on your liver about the size of a candy bar. His words, not mine. Ruined all my images of candy bars, by the way. It's going to take me a long time to get over that. So I'm on an antibiotic infusion. I've got this little magic bubble, and 3 times a day, every 8 hours, I have to plug it into a port that's in my arm. Because if I don't beat this infection, I will die. Straight up, no apologies. He said, you will die a slow, gangrenous death. Okay? A sudden deceleration trauma doesn't scare me much. But slow, gangrenous death does not sound like a party I want to attend. So I've got this thing that is super, super important to me. Well, I'm self-employed, and if I don't go to work, they don't pay me. 9 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and then 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when I have to play with Mr. Antibiotics. And I have gone to work with my little friend attached to me, and I'm unapologetic. I got to take my sweater off and plug this thing up. Why? I'm going to die if I don't. I was doing a presentation for Mazda Toyota Manufacturing. I told the guy, well, you've scheduled me to come at this time. When they're right in the middle of that, I'm going to have to take my sweater off, roll my sleeve up, and plug something into me. I hope you people aren't squeamish. But I'm not going to skip it. When Christianity becomes that important to you, and you tell the coach, you tell the band director, or you tell the choir director, or you tell the lady that runs the dance studio, yeah, we can go, but at this time, we have our infusion. This is the thing that we do because that's who we are. And it's survival and it's life. I'm unapologetic about it. So you wear it on your bracelet, you wear it on your t-shirt, you wear it on your ball cap, you put it in your front lawn, it's on the tag of your car, and it's on that flag that you fly in your yard. My daughter, when she was little, got a hold of one of my tactical flashlights. I've got this big, I think it was a Pelican flashlight that they gave me for Christmas one year. And she's standing on my thigh, and she's pushing my head backwards, and she's shining this light in my mouth. And she said, "Wider, Daddy, wider." And I'm trying to be as wide as I can without eating this flashlight. And she's "Wider, Daddy, wider." And she's pushing this thing, nearly down my throat. And finally, she just plopped down on the couch and folded those chubby little arms and said, "I can't see your heart." And we laugh that a child is silly enough to think they can look straight into our heart. And we're foolish enough to think that they can't see our hearts. Because when we say, this is what's on my bracelet, this is what's on my t-shirt, this is what's on my cap, this is what's on the front of my car, this is the flag I fly in my yard, I can see your heart. You walk into my house until I kill animals. My grandson was scared to go to sleep at the other end of our house. I thought, why is he scared to go to sleep in our house? Jackie said, there's dead animal skulls everywhere. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but she's right. Well, he knows I'm a hunter. You walk into my house and know I'm an Indiana Jones fan. You walk into my house and know I'm a Raider fan. That's a football team, by the way. Eventually they'll be good again. They haven't been significant since 1983 when they beat the Eagles. I'm living in the past. But all you got to do is walk into my house and you can see my heart. Well, your kids can see your heart because you'll wear it on your wrist and you'll wear it on your t-shirt and you'll wear it on your ball cap and you'll put it on the front of your car. And you will tell them, this is what is important to me. In the decisions you make about work, in the decisions you make about money, in the decisions you make about time, show your heart to your children. And you got to ask yourself, are we modeling compartmentalized Christianity, or does Christianity permeate everything that we do? Because Christianity is something that we are. It's not simply something that we do. And so as we start talking about training the next generation of kids, it starts with, these things are in your heart. Find them in your heart. And when they become part of our heart, then they become the things that I can't keep out of my conversation. I can't keep out of my decorations. I can't keep off my bracelets and my t-shirt and my hat and the front of my car and the flag that flies in my yard. But until we teach our children that what we do here is worship. What we do out there is church. And that's a significant difference. Because if we confuse being the church as what we do in this building, that's like confusing the marriage ceremony with being married. That's a different animal, okay? That's easy. We're in a marriage ceremony. Now we're married. That's a different animal. And sometimes we get confused that this is not church. This is when the church comes together and we worship. What we are is when we go out there. When you read Peter's letter, and Peter talks about us being living stones, and we're the living temple of God. In every culture, in every religion that has any type of a temple, whether it's a pyramid or a ziggurat or a hole in the ground or a meditation chamber with the Mayans, anytime you went to a place that they would have considered temple, temple is the intersection between the divine and the human. And in the Old Testament, when God told Solomon, you build this temple, he said, my eyes, my ears, and my heart will dwell here forever. And when you come to the temple, there's an intersection between my presence and your existence, and there's an intersection between the divine and the human. Well, in the New Testament, we're the temple. We live in God, and God lives in us. And it's an intersection of the divine and the human. And it goes beyond coming to a structure and being exposed to the presence of God. The presence of God lives in us. 140 times in the New Testament, you'll read this phrase, in Christ or with Christ. We're either buried with Christ, we die with Christ, we rise with Christ. And sometimes we don't live like we're connected to Christ, and our children don't get the idea that we're connected to Christ. Because what happens when we manifest our values and we manifest our priorities, it's not something that comes from our heart. Now, it's easy to get distracted. And I read a thing the other day that said, the devil really doesn't have to make us do anything wrong. He just has to make us busy. And that's it. And so we look at how are we going to train the next generation. And whether you're I'm the parent of children that are raising in my house, and I'm trying to produce spiritual self-reliance, or I'm influencing children that worship at the same congregation that I worship with, or I've got nieces and nephews and grandchildren, or I just have people in my life, my children, my sons-in-laws, my daughters-in-laws. How do we do that? By first of all having buy-in. This thing is who we are. It's in my heart. And then when I talk about my life, there's a natural overflow in my life about Christianity. Paul in 2 Corinthians will talk about the aroma of Christ. Now, the aroma of Christ is simply that we've been exposed to the presence of God, and because we're exposed to the presence of God, that fragrance diffuses itself wherever we go. Now, some people, when they smell Christianity, don't like the smell. It stinks. Some people, when they smell Christianity, smell a sweet, savoring aroma. I believe the difference is that when some people hear us explain Christianity, all they can hear is the sacrifice that they're required to make. And they don't like that. But some people get the sacrifice that was made. And they like that idea that God loved me enough to die for me. And Paul says, some people smell us and they smell life. Some people smell us, they smell death. Who is sufficient to this task? I'm not responsible for how you react to my smell. I'm just responsible that I expose you to it. And that's it. And so we're going to change the next generation, and we're going to influence them. We've got to decide what our priorities are, and we've got to show our children this is our priority. And if our children don't see that as a priority, then they've seen our heart. When they see our heart, they know what's really, really important. I talk a lot about this thing. I read it several years ago, and I probably, every time I've written a book, I've included it, and it's in every book I've ever written. It's called the Eisenhower box. And the Eisenhower box basically is where President Eisenhower created this matrix where he talked about priorities. I use it as a decision-making model for my time, my money, and my energy. And so if you can visualize this with me, at the top of this thing at 12 o'clock is the word important. And at 6 o'clock is not important. At 3 o'clock is urgent, and at 9 o'clock is not urgent. So you divide that thing with a plus sign, and you get 4 boxes. You have things that are urgent and important. Then you have things that are important, but they're not urgent. And then you have a box of things that are urgent but not important. And then you have a box where things are not important and not urgent. And how do I decide with my time, my money, and my energy what I'm going to put in these boxes? So I've got this much time, I've got this much energy, and I've got this much money. What am I going to do with it this week? How do I decide what gets my attention, what gets my time, what gets my money, what gets my energy? And so as you start looking at this thing, and when Eisenhower did it, he said, you do, you decide, you delegate, and you delete. Well, that's okay, but I'm just opposed to doing sermons where all my letters are the same. I don't know why, I just don't like that. And it really didn't give me a handle on how to put what where. So I played with it a little bit, and I really had this epiphany when I went to tactical medic school, which is a weird thing for me to go to. I work as a police chaplain. I'm a volunteer chaplain. And in 1992, they invited me to be a chaplain, and they assigned me to a SWAT team. So I hang out with a SWAT team. I have a Ninja Turtle vest. I have a skateboard helmet. But I'm not a cop. I'm not a shooter. I'm not an operator. I don't do any of that stuff. I just go with them when they go, and basically I'm a glorified mascot. So, I end up, and, they're kicking doors in and doing all this stuff, and I'm just kind of there. If I end up with a weapon in my hands, dogs and cats are living together, and I'll be sued to the Stone Age, okay? But I thought, hey, I need a purpose when I'm with these guys other than just praying for them while I'm there and having the ministry of presence. So I signed up with this group called Suarez International, and I'm going to go to a 4-day seminar, and I'm going to certify as a tactical medic. And I go to this class with visions of learning how to start IVs, how to deal with a pneumothorax and a hemothorax, and learn how to do a field tracheotomy with a car key. That's going to be good. I can't wait. You know what they teach you in tactical medicine? Bleeding and breathing. And that's it. If he's bleeding, stop it. If he's not breathing, start him. And that's it. A 4-day seminar to teach me how to tie a tourniquet and do chest compressions. I'm a rock climber. I can tie a knot you can't untie, okay? And I play around with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know how to make your lungs work or not work, depending on the mood I'm in. But they said, look, everything else that happens to a person medically, you've got time to do. But if he's not breathing and he's bleeding, those have immediate consequences. And that's when that little bell in my head rang. Things that are urgent and important have immediate consequences. They must have my attention right here, right now, because if I don't give my time, my money, and my energy to it, the wheels are going to fall off. I've got money. I need to feed the people. I need to heat the house, and I need to feed the truck so I can go make more money. And if I don't do that, things happen, and there's an immediate consequence to that. Now, you get over here to things that are important but not urgent. Those things have delayed consequences. You're going to pay the piper, but he's just not going to knock on your door today or this month or this year. Now, preacher, you quit preaching and went to meddling. That's your diet. That's your exercise. If you ate a donut, and when you ate a donut, an alarm went off and said, you're gaining weight, you wouldn't eat as many donuts. But you can eat a lot of donuts over a long period of time, and then you go, why my belt's so tight? Or your doctor says, hey, according to your body mass index, I hate that thing. The body mass index does not account for the fact that I've done push-ups since I was 12. Okay? My wife has this, we have to go to this screening every year for her job. And so I go and they go, your body mass index is a dumpster fire. I'm 5'4". And at 5'4" and 160 pounds, I'm overweight. Literally, the chart says I'm overweight. So the last time I went, and I was in a mood because I didn't want to go. The last time I went, the lady goes, okay, Mr. Jones, and are you male, female, or other? I said, what do you mean other? She goes, well, it's, you get to choose other stuff. I said, that's ridiculous. She goes, look, I'm just filling out the paperwork. How much do you weigh? At that time, about 180 pounds. How tall are you? 5'11". She looked at me with those judging eyes. I said, if he can be a girl, I can be 5'11". I cured the body mass index straight up right now. So I don't get any nasty letters from the insurance company anymore because my body mass index works. Okay? What is it? I'm trans slender? That's what my deal is. But If you don't take care of your weight and you don't make investments and you don't spend time with your spouse while your kids are little, because you start by yourself, you end by yourself, and if you make investments into only the kids, then when the house is empty, it'll be empty because there'll only be one person living there. These things are important, but they're not urgent. Nobody's checking you today. Your young men who are 16 and 17 years old, when they're 45, aren't going to wake up one day and suddenly be elders. Who they date and who they marry will affect whether or not they can be elders. Their temperament, their self-control, their spiritual maturity. You know, you don't add water and get an elder. That's something you do, you pursue as you grow your lifetime. This is super important, but nobody checks on you today. And so we have things that have immediate consequences and we have things that have delayed consequences. Things that are urgent but not important, those have perceived consequences. That's when Facebook and instant envy and all those things we do on social media tell us this is what success is and this is what our kids need to be doing and this is what we need to be involved in. Those are perceived consequences. You don't need the next version of the iPhone. Okay, your iPhone already has more computing power than the original space shot. You've got a camera, a GPS, a computer, an email thing, and you can crush candy. You don't need the iPhone 37. The iPhone 12 will do okay. But when they come out, what do we have to do? Have the next one. You don't have to go to the movie the night it opens. It'll be on cable in 6 months. And if you go the night it opens, the people who wear costumes will be there. You don't want to be in that crowd anyway. All right? And so, but we have this idea, hey, my kids have to play 19 sports. And we can't miss Little League to go to the beach with our grandparents. I promise you the Major League Scouts don't start coming around till at least the 7th grade. Right? We have this perception that this is success and this is wealth and this is happiness, and these consequences are not really real, they're just perceived. And then you've got this category here, it's not important, it's not urgent, and they have no consequences at all. Now, I may get in trouble here. I put mowing the lawn in that category. I live in the country. I don't have a HOA. Nobody named Karen tells me what to do in my yard. All right. I've got a 35-foot tower we call Fort Gunner. It's my grandson's playhouse. It's 3 stories tall. Has one of those giant black tubes as a slide and a 160-foot zip line. Okay. And if I don't cut the grass ever, in November the good Lord will kill the whole thing. I'll get a good frost and we're done. If I'm lucky, I'll get army worms. Okay? I don't have to fool with it. And so I've got a chance to go for a walk with my wife, take my dad fishing, or drive to Georgia and play with the grandkids, or cut the grass. Guess what I'm going to do? Because my life won't change if I don't cut the grass. And there's some things that have 0 consequences. Now, because I'm in a room full of people who've gathered together on a Sunday morning to commune with the Lord and worship, I can safely say that probably 95% of us would agree together, urgent and important, not urgent, not important. We probably don't even need to talk about those things. We understand and we get it. Where we misdirect our children and we lose our balance and we lose our souls is when we take the things that have delayed consequences and we put them behind the things that have perceived consequences. We take these markers for success or happiness that the world is selling us, and we make perceived consequences more important than delayed consequences. And then we wake up one day and wonder why our kids aren't in church, or why our kids don't have happy marriages, or why our kids don't feel successful, or why our marriage is not successful, or why our habit of attending church somehow got superimposed and replaced easily with something else. I don't think we have to debate what's urgent and important. We know the things that have immediate consequences, and because we're functioning adults, we attend them. I don't think we have to debate what's not urgent and what's not important, because they have 0 consequences, and as functioning adults, we don't have to worry about it. But where we lose our souls is when we take this perception of success and happiness and the American dream, and we let it, with perceived consequences, supersede the things that have delayed consequences. And then we're not making good decisions. So as parents, as believers, as uncles and aunts and grandparents, What is it that we do for our children? Well, number one, we show them by example what's in our heart. And every opportunity we have to connect daily living with Christianity, we have to do that. Spirituality must have relevance to the present human condition. If what I am as a Christian doesn't affect how I work, it doesn't affect how I parent, it doesn't affect how I treat my spouse, it doesn't affect how I treat my neighbors, then it's just something I do like a hobby. But when every time you see me, there's a manifestation. And by the way, when Jesus talks about discipleship, in Matthew 28, he says, go and make disciples. Literally, it doesn't say, go ye. It says, as you are going about. So the place you buy your groceries, where you pump your gas, at the Little League field, the houses that you jog by, all of those places are places where I manifest my discipleship. And so evangelism is not something that I put my life on hold and go to some third world country and do. Evangelism is that thing that I do every day of my life because I'm manifesting that this thing is written in my heart. And I wear it on my bracelet, I wear it on my t-shirt, I wear it on my cap, it's on the bumper sticker of my car, and it's on the flag in my yard. And if I don't do it like that, the people around me say, hey, this Christianity thing you do, really not real. This Christianity thing you do is really not authentic because we don't see it everywhere. When Paul writes to the church in Thessalonica, he says, you are witnesses in God also, that when we were with you, we behaved in a way that was blameless and innocent and without reproach. And you are witnesses in God also that we encouraged, we comforted, and we urged you to live a life worthy of God. So when I start talking about being a good parent and trying to raise spiritually self-reliant children. Now, spiritual self-reliance doesn't mean I don't need God. It means I can be a Christian without you. Isn't that our job? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're raising adults. I want my daughter to be able to function as an adult when I'm gone. My job is not to make her happy. My job is not to make her life easy. My job is to make her a functional adult. Well, my job is also to make her a functional, mature, spiritual person, so that when she's by herself and has her own family and has her own husband, she can make spiritually relevant decisions based on not what I say, but what God has said. And if our children don't have competency in Scripture, they can't make those decisions. In my private practice, I learned this from Dr. Douglas Tate. He defines a problem as a lack of resources. And so you come to my office and we start talking. I go, you're here, you want to be here. What do you need to get there? That's the therapeutic intervention. Sometimes you need maturity, sometimes you need experience, sometimes you need education, sometimes you need to modify your brain chemistry. But a problem is defined as a lack of resources. In Peter's letter, 2 Peter, he says, God has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of Him. When I teach my children that the answer to your problems is this book, it's not Facebook, it's not Snapchat, it's not Instagram, it's not Wikipedia, it's not Google, it's not the latest trend, it's not a political party. Everything you need to live life and live godlike lives, godliness, is here. Now, the problem that we run into is if a problem is a lack of resources, and we've got the ultimate resource inspired by the Holy Spirit that told these early immature churches how to get along, how to be sexually pure, how to worship God. If you read the book of Romans, he solves their salvation problem. You're not special because you're a Jew. You're not special because you're a Gentile. I can indict you because you were a Jew and you didn't do it. I can indict you because you were a Gentile and you could look at creation and know there's a God. You didn't do it. You've got a sin problem. And the only way to fix your sin problem is by faith. And your faith accesses you to God's grace and then you're saved. When you get to Romans chapter 12, he says this is how a spiritually mature, mentally healthy person lives. And you can read Romans 12 with the idea of dealing with conflict, dealing with difficult people, how to work in a system, and how not to be a narcissist. And Romans 12 is how a spiritually healthy person, mentally healthy person lives. Romans chapter 13 is this is how spiritually mature, mentally healthy people get along with civil government. Romans chapter 14 and 15, this is how people who are spiritually mature and mentally healthy interact with other people who have different beliefs about religious traditions. This guy can eat meat, this guy can't. This guy drinks wine, this guy doesn't. This guy thinks this day's special, this guy doesn't think you should celebrate it at all. And he tells people how to get along. Everything in the New Testament is about relationships with people that are affected by their relationship with God. And so we have the ultimate resource. A problem is defined as a lack of resources. This is the resource we need to be tuning our kids into. Now, if a problem is a lack of resources, then a dysfunction is a misuse of resources. So I've got the stuff I need, I just don't use it. In Stephen Glenn's book, Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World, he says our children have to have three perceptions. I'm capable, I'm significant, and the things that I choose influence my outcomes. Our children in the church lack the capability to read and understand the Bible on their own. Period. And if they can't read it, they won't read it. Your children need to be exposed to a version of the Bible that is in modern English. They need to be able to look and read in context. This is what God said to the church at Galatia, and if this is what the Galatians needed to do to solve their problem, I can superimpose that. But we don't teach our children to read and study their Bibles on their own. We tell our children the Bible's hard to understand. You've got to have me to help you. The Bible's written on a third grade level in Koine Greek. And anybody who reads at reading level should be able to pick up the Bible. But if you have it in 1611 English, or you have it where the idioms and the metaphors aren't translated, then you don't understand it. We can't raise spiritually self-reliant children until we put them in the hands of a resource they can use. And if a problem is a lack of resources, then a dysfunction is a misuse of resources. And we're not teaching our children how to appropriately study the Bible. And the Bible should be studied a book at a time. I don't think you need to read the whole Bible every year. I think you need to read the book of Colossians 15 times this month. If you don't understand what God said to the church at Colossians with just the book of Colossians by itself, then you don't understand the book of Colossians. What I tell the children to do in my Bible class is, hey, let's read this letter and let's write Paul back. Because if I send you a letter and you can respond to me, you understood what I wrote, right? But if I send... Is that the end of class or been boarded by Klingons? That's an interesting bell. Wow, I need to find a phaser. Wow. If you can understand it in its context and you can respond to it, then you understand it. And you interview your children and say, hey, read this Bible passage, what does it say? And most of the time your kids go, oh no. Because we've dumbed down the word and we've made them use workbooks and we haven't used the book. Spiritual self-reliance is the goal of our congregation. If you've got children or if you're influencing children, you've got to be a place where you say, hey, this is the resource, this is the tool, this is what God says to these people, and if God told these people to do this, how do I apply it to what God tells me to do? I appreciate your attention. Thank you for participating. Thank you for the